This is my first miniature build and my first YouTube video. As it should become obvious, I'm kinda winging both. But with that out of the way, let's build a house. I'm using XPS foam for the foundation of the building and foam core board with the backing paper removed for the walls of the structure. By the way, pretty much every technique I used here is what I learned by watching channels like Hobby Times, Stutz and Studios, Bill Making Stuff, and Steady Crafted by Craftsman. If you're watching this, you almost certainly know about it, but I'll link them in the description anyway. The house in question is something like a general farm store, something you'd find out in rural areas. I'm going for a cartoonish look, so precision isn't exactly a huge priority here. I cut out a notch in the base, rotated the cutout, and glued it back into place to create a couple of steps. The hot glue gun makes the first of its many appearances here. And the gluing continues with the foam core walls getting stuck to the base to form the shell of the building. After a lot of unnecessary measuring, I cut out a door and a window in one of the walls and completed the main structure. I used a pre-made clapboard style panel to clad the exterior of the house. You can absolutely make your own simply by slightly overlapping strips of wood, but I didn't really believe in my ability to make that look decent. The panel meant for the front of the building got the same door and window openings as the foam. I grabbed a few strips of balsa wood of varying thickness and width and cut and superglued them together to build the door frame. I wanted the door to have a chicken wire backing, and this mesh wire from Michaels was perfect. The mesh is thin and you absolutely don't need these massive tin snips, but it's what I had nearby. From what I learned by watching way too much YouTube, wood glue does the trick when it comes to adhering foam core and wood. There's precisely zero need to use the more expensive Type On 3 here, but again, it's what I had on hand. I use masking tape to provide some holding power. As the wall started coming up, I started trimming the window and door using more strips of balsa and yet more superglue. The structure is supposed to look old, so the trim should look like it's made from rough sawn beams, which was the style at the time. The small porch was clad in some more pre-made cladding, although it can absolutely be done by cutting individual boards if you have the skills, or frankly the patience. More wood glue and copious amounts of masking tape later, the siding was done. The roof is a combination of balsa panels held together by more balsa panels and glue. I have to admit the quality of the ridge finishing is pretty poor. If I did it again, I would have spent more time planning and maybe beveling the roof panels or adding a ridge. This being a rustic build is a tiny bit of saving grace. The porch needed a railing, so I put one together using yet more balsa strips. And because this is a somewhat old-timey building, I decided to put a chimney right around here. The chimney was cut out of a round dowel that I will cover in metal, which will be provided by an aluminum can of kvass, or kvass in Cyrillic. It's a drink that tastes like a bread in a can, and it's fantastic. After engaging some really sketchy snipping, I ended up with a nice shiny piece of aluminum. I cut it into a few pieces to cover the chimney dowel and create a few roof patches. Using super glue, again, I attached all of it to the roof. And here's the result, along with a few pieces of thin acrylic that I cut out for the window panes and scuffed up from the backside. Prior to gluing the patches to the roof, I kind of beat them up a bit to give them some texture. I also used way too much hot glue to adhere to the chimney. It looks ridiculous and I will cut it off later in the build. With the main structure complete, I moved to making various accessories for the house, chairs, crates, and so on. Here you see me building a small chair using thin dowels and bits of balsa wood. And yes, CA glue again. It's messy but doable, partly because I'm not showing you close-ups of the really messy parts. I made 2 chairs and figured they'd look good on the porch. A country store feels like it should have a box and some crates hanging around it as well. The core of the box consists of more foam core hot glued together and covered in thin balsa panels. Then applied a few strips to the edges and sides of the box to give it a more realistic appearance. Using the same basic building techniques, I put together a couple of, let's call them apple crates. I like the one on the right more, but both will work for this purpose. Also, there really needs to be an indicator that this is, a shop. So I started building a sign that would go on the roof. A thin sheet of balsa with some thicker strips around the edge, glued and taped together with a couple of angle supports in the corners. Back to accessories for a moment. I thought that a rain barrel and a wagon wheel would look great hanging on the side of the building, so naturally I made them on the lathe. The wagon wheel was not a success, if I'm honest with myself. The center hub was supposed to have spokes going into it, but I pretty quickly realized it would be torn to shreds when drilled along the grain. I went ahead and finished it using yet more glue, but it ain't pretty. The barrel, however, turned out pretty decent. I drew in some lines to simulate staves and followed them with a wood-burning tip on my soldering iron. Put it together with the wheel and they don't look half bad at all. And now the painting. I'm not a fan of it, so I did not look forward to this. I spray primed the entire structure and decided to use acrylic paints for pretty much everything. The roof got a dark brown. The trim a slightly lighter brown. I chose cinnamon for the walls and mixed together a truly awful brown green for the patio. I felt it needed some help, so the railing got a pop of color in the form of blue, as did the chairs. The barrel was painted using a watered down brown, basically a paint wash, and I winged the rest of the accessories. The roof patches were always going to be tricky, so I threw a lot of stuff at them. First a metallic marker, followed by a vaguely dirty paint wash, neither of which really ended up working for me. Don't do this. Alright, just one more accessory, this time a pitchfork. I clipped the heads off some small nails, probably ruining my cutting pliers along the way, and superglued them into the shape of a fork. I wedged that into a handle made from a thin dowel. It too got a paint wash. It was time to put together a base for this build. This is a box, once again from Michaels, which I turned upside down and applied foam core to. In order to create the ground, come here, little squirt, I combined Mod Podge, wood glue, acrylic paint, and actual dirt. This is, I think, the recipe for custard by Bill of Bill Making Stuff. Mix it together and apply liberally. Maybe sprinkle some small rocks on top and dry brush a few parts of it to provide some contrast. I placed the structure on the base and glued down a few bits of preserved moss to serve as a tiny bit of greenery. One last bit of painting to do. The sign that goes on the roof. This board's got brown and the sign itself is a bright yellow. Let's do what to call the store. Actually, no. I have something better in mind.